What's up, what's up, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of MB2 Underground. I am Sarah Kiefer, and I'm joined with Joe Fox today. Joe.
Howdy, folks.
Joseph.
How you feeling, Miss Kiefer?
I feel fantastic. How are you feeling?
Awesome. Excellent. Got another really cool guest today. Really cool story. All the folks we talked to have a unique situation, unique background, unique story. And, we've got another special guest today.
I'm excited. Tell me a little bit about who we've got.
Awesome. Well, Dr. David Nguyen, owner of two locations just a bit north of Dallas and Frisco.
Oh, in our own backyard.
In our own backyard, yeah. The booming metropolis of Frisco. At one point was, I think, the fastest growing city in the nation.
It was.
I think it held that title for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. I love Frisco.
Dr. Nguyen, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
This is kind of cool.
Yeah,
So-
you like the whole setup?
For sure. It's very unique.
The headphones are interesting too, huh?
They are. And it's picking up every little sound, too.
It takes a second to get used to.
Yes.
Absolutely. So Dr. Nguyen, you have you had a unique introduction to MB2. So tell us about that. Tell us about your story. How did you get to know about MB2?
So I was an associate in a practice in Frisco. I had come in right out of dental school. They hired me to replace an existing associate that was transitioning out. And so the cool thing about the whole situation was I was supposed to be eventually turn into a long-term partnership. The owner was a younger doctor, probably 4 or 5 years older than I was. His wife was the office manager running the business and doing a very good job. And that's kind of why I wanted to come into this practice. It was thriving. They had a great culture.
So your long-term plan as you joined the practice was to be an owner. You kind of went in with that expectation.
Correct.
Cool.
And there was multiple things that played in a role as far as why it didn't pan out the way it did. And it kind of worked out for me because about 5 years into it, they had approached me about, hey, do you want to buy into this practice? And so we discussed it at length. And at the time, I was like, I don't think I'm quite ready for this transition.
Yeah.
And then within about a couple weeks later, they said, hey, since you declined that opportunity, we're going to sell it to Heartland. So
Wow.
It must have been going on for a couple, at least months prior to that, because that due diligence process takes a while. So,
Yeah.
And so I said, as soon as that came on, I said, well, can we hold off and can I get if I can get the funding there, would you sell me the practice? So we started looking at the different avenues, and Dr. Cody Brown, he owns a practice out in Hazlitt, and I was an associate looking to transition to ownership. And he said, hey, you should look at MB2. The business model is awesome. They support the doctors. They really want to maintain the integrity of the practice while giving the doctor full autonomy and essentially coming in as a silent partner and bring in all sorts of resources. And the ideas sounded great. So once I started doing my due diligence and research in it, talking to the executive team at the time, Barry Puckett, V at the time, I remember getting grilled by V because he's like, you're in Frisco. This is a very competitive market. How are we going to survive?
Yeah, DFW is hard.
Yes. Especially Frisco, given the fact that it's a very desirable area. You talked about growth in Frisco. It's boomed. And so everybody's moving out to Frisco, right?
I tried to buy a house there, but I couldn't afford it.
Yeah, well, it's
Womp womp.
expensive.
Yeah, it is.
So,
I was
anyway.
way priced out.
Yeah. So anyway, long story short, it ended up working out, and I'm so grateful it did because going into this new ownership position, especially in a well-run practice, especially in one that's already built out and very much running, you need some additional support. And not having any experience on ownership, it was a little daunting.
Yeah.
Right. I still felt very passionate about the team and the culture and the patients, and knowing that I wanted to maintain that integrity there, but not necessarily knowing how to run a practice. It was concerning. And even in the beginning stages of it, there was some long hours spent those first handful of weeks just making sure that everything's running and smoothly. And I was working with Will Gill. Now he's like a high man on the totem pole now. Yeah.
Mr. RVP.
Mr. RVP, yeah. So anyway, but yeah, he was a wealth of information, being able to give me a lot of good advice, best practice. I loved having him as an advocate because he was able to work through understanding what MB2 was wanting, and I was able to voice my concerns and what I was trying to achieve, and we were able to always find some sort of middle ground in that, which was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just for my own sake, because we recently started an owner transitions department where we're trying to better support associates who are interested in becoming owners and owners that are ready to kind of exit. What do you feel like was the key to success for you transitioning from associate to owner with or without MB2? What do you think made you successful in that transition, or advice you would give to somebody who is maybe looking to make that move?
I think the biggest thing is making sure that I mean, I think the owner, whoever's transitioned to ownership position is not likely knowing how to run a business. That and understanding that there's always a question, especially when it's coming into like, who is this entity that's coming in? Because I had no history with MB2.
Yeah.
And that was also a very unique situation for me at the time because normally at that time they were only moving associates they had prior experience with and had been working with them in another office into ownership roles like that.
Yeah.
So I was one of the first where they had no prior history, and we was kind of leap of faith on both sides, right?
Wow.
So I would say probably understanding. I think on the ownership, on the associate or the doctor side, understanding that MB2 truly does value your input as a new owner coming into it and trying to help mold that and shape that.
Yeah.
And they truly want the best for the practice itself, right? And so I think that's something that would be beneficial for someone transitions to know that they're truly on your side and wanting to support your decisions. Obviously, they don't want you going crazy with stuff. Can't go buy a bunch of equipment for no reason, but they truly do want to support the vision and the goal of the donor doctors, which is phenomenal to know that you have someone who's an advocate for you on that side specifically.
That's good feedback. I like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, V will usually throw out the fact that when we went through and I acquired the practice, we were looking at adding 2 more patient rooms to maintain the volume of patients that we were seeing. We were already growing beyond our britches, if you will.
Wow.
And so I was advocating for ADEC chairs, which are like a higher premium chairs.
Okay,
You're the
Frisco.
ADEC
Yes,
doctor.
I'm the ADEC doctor.
You tell that story all the time.
I know.
Wait, I
Love
don't know
it.
the story.
You don't
Can
know
somebody
the
tell me
ADEC
the story? No.
Oh, this is
So-
great. Dr. V tells this story all the time in Discovery Days.
Okay, hit me.
So we're looking at adding 2 more patient rooms. We need equipment for that, chairs, all that sort of thing. Normally, their recommendation is to go with TPC, which is a very entry-level, very basic chair, which is fine.
Okay.
We had ADEC chairs, though, in all the other operatories that we had. I had 6 operatories. And so I was really pushing for, I want these ADEC chairs because it would be synonymous or harmonious with what we already have. So if I have to get replacement equipment and we're doing all repairs, we already kind of know what the chairs look like and feel like. And plus, the patients will be able to feel potentially or sense the difference in quality. And there's a notable difference, at least in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you look at it from that standpoint. So I remember distinctly getting calls from V, had a call from Will, then I got a call from, who was it, Dardano or Shawan? And they're like, hey, do you really, really want these chairs? And I'm like, yes, I really want these chairs. Yes, they're going to be more, and I'm willing to pay the difference for them. And he said, okay, all right, we're going to do it. And so we'll just get the chairs. And so, yeah, that was the one part, especially in the transition period, where I was like, okay, this is going to be a make or break sort of situation. If they're not going to allow me to make the calls that I feel like are going to be the best of my practice,
100%.
then again, it's going to be very difficult from here on out. So the fact that they were willing to allow me to pursue that gave me a lot of confidence in knowing that they truly do want to support my vision and my goal for the practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that from there on out, it was just been smooth sailing. So obviously our practice has thrived and doing really well. I think that's a big part of why we're able to have the weight and be able to make calls that we can make, and knowing that they truly know that we're trying to keep things going and smoothly and continue to grow the practice. So
Yeah, we tell that story all the time when talking to potential partners, just as a mechanism to say, hey, this is an example of operational autonomy.
Yeah.
Dr. Nguyen wanted those chairs. He thought it mattered, and he was putting up his capital. So we trusted him because he's the one who was on the ground. He knew best.
Yeah.
And so far, that's been the recurring theme throughout this whole transition. I love the fact that MB2 brings in all the resources. They do a lot of the legwork and groundwork. When we were looking at adding the second location, they brought in a broker. They looked at all the different potential locations, and they said, hey, here it is. What do you want to do? And so I could always ask for feedback. Okay, well, what would you recommend because of these demographics? But they were always very much like, it's your decision. It's your decision. So I think that's something that is very valuable for a new doctor coming into a role if they're wanting to change things and for the better and what they feel is the best for the practice and the culture. So and MB2 supporting that is crucial.
Awesome.
Tell us a little bit more about that. You ended up becoming an owner, bought out your previous doctor at your practice, joined MB2, and then built a de novo. How did you know you were ready for another location?
So when I bought the practice, we were at the point where our recall base was hefty. And again, that's I think a reflection of our reputation within the community.
Those ADEC chairs.
Yeah, the ADEC chairs. Yeah, those ADEC chairs, they're selling it. And it's more so the culture. The patients are getting a very unique feel at our practice, and they've come to really cherish that. So they know they're being treated well, so they send all their friends and family. Right now, I don't do really any marketing. Zero.
That's the dream.
We don't do
Not
sales
even having
management.
to.
Yeah. and we have about 100 to 140 new patients a month.
Jeez.
Wow.
So all coming from word of mouth. And that was something that was started by the previous owners, so we wanted to maintain that through that whole transition period. And I forgot what your question was.
How did you know you were ready for a second location?
So the first time we went through this, we were already scheduling like 6 months out for a recall. So if a patient canceled their cleaning appointment, I didn't have availability to schedule them until they were 6 months out. So when I bought the practice, that's where we were. So we added 2 more patient rooms. That was in 2018. So 2019, we started seeing that continued growth increasing. And so knowing the stresses of having to work in a situation where there's construction going on too, I'm like, I don't want to have to do this again if we can avoid this. So I want to kind of get ahead of it. And so when we started seeing our patient base being booked solid for 4 or 5 months, I said, okay, we needed to start planning now so that we're not having to stress. Because again, we had multiple patients who were, when we told them, hey, I don't have any spots for you for 6 months, they were saying, well, I'm going to go somewhere else then for my cleaning. So they would, and oftentimes they would come right back because they knew they were getting treated well here. So so that's where kind of we were preemptively planning for that with adding the second location. So again, if you're starting to see that recall base is growing there, then we decided to make the plans to go ahead because and we know the construction aspect takes a while, months, it could be years, depending on how supply are and that sort of thing. I think when we had chairs looking to install, they were taking 6 months. There was a 6-month lead time, I think, at the time for just the dental chairs. So we knew all those things were going to come into account. So we planned preemptively to make sure that we weren't going to get to the point where our patient base was being stressed. Even with that, though, towards the tail end of that time, we were having to schedule out now 5, 6 months. So the patient base was already starting to feel that restriction from that standpoint. Fortunately, we were able to let them know, hey, we have more room coming. Don't worry. So keeping them in the loop was helpful as well. So, but that's how kind of where we knew we needed to start planning for a second location. So with that being the case too, that location is close to my existing office enough to where we can funnel patients over there to be able to facilitate that.
Yeah.
How much of the nitty-gritty detail did you get involved with the de novo?
So I'm a control freak, so I have everything. Which,
Great awareness. I
yes,
love it.
yeah, which was a blessing and a curse. But yeah, I definitely feel like for me personally, I like to be in the know of a lot of the details there. And I think part of it too, and the beauty with MB2 is that you can be in and hands-on as much as you want to or be hands-off as much as you want to, right? Your DOs and everyone else at MB2 Central is going to help support that. And you can be as high level or as into it as you want to be. So
now you were in a unique position, taking over ownership from a doctor that had been there for a while, and I assume was like leaving, not going to stay back and work back at all. How did you establish leadership within an existing practice that already was flourishing? Staff had been working with that doctor for a long time. How did you establish leadership in a situation like that?
So I was an associate for 5 years before the transition happened. So I think that there were some benefits from that standpoint. I think part of it is there was a lot of leadership opportunities that I had growing up through high school, through Boy Scouts or Awana or the different clubs and activities and things that we were in. So that kind of prepped me for that to a certain extent. But I do think it's a situation where any new owner who's not had a lot of history with the practice needs to be able to come in and just help support the team. Because that's what anytime that you have a transition happening, there's always everyone's fearing what's going to happen once the transition happens. So I think coming in and being able to genuinely let them know, hey, we're here, this is what we're looking to change, this is why we're looking to change. You have to obviously get buy-in from the team and help them understand why. Even then, it's still hard because you're going to have people who are just like, well, it's always better when Dr. Davis was an owner and all that sort of thing. So you're still going to have some qualms there from that standpoint. I think transition is always hard no matter what you're looking for. No matter why you're wanting to make changes, there's always going to be people who are going to find resistance against that. Absolutely. So, and I think that's just something for me that was hard because I've been with a lot of those team members for 5 years. So to see some of them having to transition out for whatever various reasons, it was challenging. So from that standpoint,
so just to rewind just a little bit, how did you know you wanted to be an owner right out of school?
Oh, I knew I wanted to be an owner. That was has always been the dream. I know the model is changing quite a bit now, especially with tuition costs being higher. So being able to carry hefty tuition or loans for school, plus now taking on an even heftier loan for a practice, it's daunting, right? And so that's something that I think everybody needs to keep in mind is that dentistry is changing to a certain extent, and eventually you could be. And an owner at some point. And that looks so much different than it did just 5 years ago, right? Yeah. It used to be solo practitioners, private practice feel, and that's not necessarily the case now. And there's definitely some pros and cons on both ends. Because I had an associate of mine that transitioned, and now he's a private practice owner of a smaller practice in Denton. But he's told me before multiple times, like, it's stressful. His wife, we still kind of keep in touch, and they're saying, like, he's saying, spending 80 hours a week trying to not only do the clinical side, but also running the practice.
Business, yeah.
And so again, you reflect back, I'm like, okay, well, great. I'm glad I have someone who can support me to take some of that load off and that burden off, so that my work-life balance is so much more healthy.
What advice would you give to dental students, kind of in the context of what you just said about the changing industry?
I think part of you have some people who are very business minded. They feel confident that they can transition into a situation where they can own right off the bat, and that's great for some, right? I would say if you're wanting that, then trying to find a situation where the existing owner is willing to help transition and mentor on the business side of things would be beneficial. Or again, if you can find an organization like MB2 or something like that where there's some additional support from that standpoint, it's going to make your life so much better, and you're not going to be pulling out your hair on a regular basis. So, I think I would highly consider something along those lines. You need mentorship or some support from that standpoint. There are some who already have either owned their own business or something like that, and so they'd be able to transition into an ownership role very seamlessly. But I would say for a smaller practice, probably would be a little bit easier. There's less that you have to manage from that standpoint. For a bigger, larger practice, it's daunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a blessing you didn't take those owners up on that first buyout opportunity.
yeah.
But what was it? What wasn't right at the time?
There was several different things. And again, I think being a younger, naive, sort of not knowing what I do now, it worked out for the best. Some of our business philosophies just didn't really truly align. And that really became evident when we transitioned. And how they handled some of the things that they did, and the ways that they did. But a big part of it was finance. The financing piece is figuring out how to finance my portion of it. And I think part of it is when Heartland was willing to come and give them a cash offer up front.
That looks real nice.
It looks real nice. And so they're like, well, you have to at least meet that. And so that was a hefty burden there that was alleviated. And the crazy part is that, again, all this whole transition happened within a matter of November, December, January, by the end of February, so 3 months.
Wow.
From when I was told that they were selling to Heartland to when I found MB2 to when we actually closed on the deal. It was like a 3-month process.
Whirlwind.
It was a whirlwind. So,
and we've talked about Frisco being a little bit of a saturated market with dentists. As a general dentist and stepping into ownership, what do you think sets your practice apart or differentiates your practice in a place where you can throw a rock and find a dentist?
Like I said, one thing I have to give credit to is the previous owners really set the foundation work and had a really good culture already. And so we were able to just take that and just keep on running with it, which was phenomenal. And I think that would be something, a new owner, that would be something that would be a priority. If you can find something like that, you will have a lot more, hopefully a more seamless transition, like we did. If you don't, then, or if you're starting with a de novo or whatever, you're having to put all that sweat equity and try to get that reputation up to where you could thrive in that sort of environment. And not to say you can't, it's just potentially going to be harder. I will say getting networked within my community, we were very active at church, very active in just sporting events with the kids and that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, and I wear my stuff all over, my Heritage branded stuff everywhere. So people eventually learn. And it's not something that I'm really flamboyant about, like, oh, hey, I'm a dentist, look at me.
Because then people are going to be like, can you look at this thing? Like, what do you think this is?
Yeah, what do you think this is? Yeah. And you still get that every now and then. When, like, neighbors and friends and that sort of stuff, like, you get random texts at all sorts of times of day. But, I mean, I think getting out there and showing them that you're part of the community and, going on mission trips, serving in the community and that sort of stuff really speaks to them that you're invested and they want to then come and see you, and I think that's crucial.
Wow,
it would be beneficial.
Yeah. Culture is such a key thing. It's so difficult for most businesses to build and even to understand because it's intangible in a way. But no, that's fantastic. So we have a few fun questions that we like to ask right towards the end. Favorite or craziest patient story?
Craziest patient story. I'm trying to think. There are so many.
And it's a family show. I mean, Miss Kiefer is a little bit risque over here sometimes.
Yeah, no.
You said there's a few, but I know that there was one that popped into your head immediately. That's the one we want.
So it's funny because, patients behave so differently in different settings. And, you have laughing gas that kind of loosens people up. And so I use this story sometimes because I had one patient, she was deathly afraid. She came in, she had neglected her mouth for years. And so she was worried about what she was going to find. She had a broken tooth. She wanted it fixed. And so I remember I came walking into the room and she was sobbing.
Oh, no.
With anxiety and nerves and that sort of thing. And so we, trying to be very, kind of nurturing, caring, and understanding that, hey, we're here to just help in whatever way you need. And so we decided we need to do some treatment that day. Husband was sitting in the corner and he's just kind of soaking it all in. And so she's sobbing. She wouldn't even look me in the eyes, and she was just like, she was like, I'm sorry. And so I said, this is what you need. We're going to take really good care of you. Let's get you on some laughing gas, get you comfortable. Anyway, so yes, we got her on laughing gas. That starts going, and once it starts flowing, it's almost like a 180. She started like laughing. There were some moments where she's singing, and the husband's just looking like, "What'd you give her?"
I love it.
She's high.
So yeah, exactly. And then what's funny is once we turned the laughing gas down and she started coming off, she went back to that kind of quiet, reserved, wouldn't really look me in the eyes.
You're like,
for
let's
a first
just turn
minute.
this right back up.
Yeah. So the husband was like, "Can I take some of that?"
Right. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So
yeah. My 8-year-old's big fan of the nitrous. So
Yes.
Yeah, I love it.
it definitely helps for sure. So
I think I only had it once whenever I got a root canal. And I remember just feeling like I was in a different world. And then I was like, I get why people like this.
Yes.
Like why you find like people in the back room huffing it,
Yeah. Well, there's patients who will ask for it for every single visit, even for their cleaning. So there's,
man.
like, okay, if you want it, you can get it.
There you
So,
go.
that
I
you're
love
paying.
it.
Yeah, exactly. You're paying for it.
Another fun question. So you've
Yeah.
been with MB2 for several years now. What's your favorite MB2 story or experience from like an MB2 event?
MB2 event. I love the owner strips. I can't say enough about those. Being an owner and having access to those, and obviously, you've been on them, Joe. So it's fun. And you see it. V really likes to lean into the fun aspect of things and make it an experience to remember.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Which is something that as an owner you get to appreciate. So they lavish accommodations, lavish experiences, and all that sort of thing. Getting my nickname, No Fun Win. So yeah. So again, we were what were we doing?
Whitewater rafting.
Down the river, and so Cody Brown and his wife, me and my wife, and then there was another couple. I can't remember their names. There's so many different people you meet along those trips, and then and you only see them for like one time every year. So it's nice when you get to see them again. But we were rafting down the river, and V's thing is always having fun. So he's going and splashing all sorts of people. He's like trying to pass people down the river.
Yeah, he ripped me off the back of. I'm thinking we might have been on the same raft.
He definitely tried to splash us, and
He
so
ripped me off the back, and I don't know how to swim, so I was like crying in the
dang.
water.
But you had a life jacket.
Yeah,
right?
I forgot for a second though.
Okay.
Yeah.
In that moment of fear, yeah. So he splashed us, and then I was behind Dr. Brown, and Dr. Brown's trying to like splash him back. So I grab his paddle. I was like, if you splash him back, he's just gonna make it worse, right? We're just adding fuel to the fire and just playing along with his game. So like,
Such a parental response.
I know, so mature. So I'm like, don't splash him back. And so then V is like, oh, come on, Nguyen, come on, we're just having fun. And so he brings his raft over and he tries to pull me in. Yeah, he tries to pull me in on that one. And then that's me stopping and saying, hey, we're gonna not do this. He was like, yeah, you're no fun, Nguyen. So I'm like, okay,
We're not going to drown today.
yeah, we're not gonna drown today.
Good decision.
Yeah,
Good
exactly.
decision.
I
There
still
were life jackets though, Joe. Nobody was going to drown.
exactly until you hit a rapid, and then who knows what happens.
Right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
rocks, head injuries,
Yeah.
and such.
Paddles from people.
Yeah, right. That too. When they're
Yeah.
waving at you.
So that's how I got my nickname. And so I don't know if he still remembers that, but
You
I'm
might
sure
just
it
want to
does.
duck out so that you don't hear it before you leave.
exactly.
Dr. Nguyen, really appreciate you taking the time.
And thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
No,
thank
this
you
is
so
a
much for
blast.
coming out.
Hopefully you got
All
some
the way from
content that could
Frisco.
be helpful. So
100%. Great stuff.